All right, good to see you. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, where we'll pick up. We have covered most of these first 14 verses, but I'll summarize them for us, and then we'll move on to the next section. And keep in mind that chapters 1 through 6 summarize as the vanity of all things under the sun. And so now in 7 through 12, the preacher takes us from there and says, okay, what's the wisdom we ought to live with? What are wisdom actions? How can we live in wisdom in order to deal with the vanity of all things earthly? There can be a lot of inequities, crooked things that have already been mentioned. And so now he goes from there and say, well, how do you deal with these crooked things? They're going on all the time. They're frustrating. They're things that bother us oftentimes a lot. So how do we live in these days of adversity? One of the things you're going to notice throughout this section is there is a lot of talk about the adversity going on. This is very Malachi, Nehemiah-like. One of the reasons that many scholars believe that Ecclesiastes was written more in the Persian era by one who simply in the first two chapters compared Solomon's day to show that that was not going to satisfy. So the preacher is really pretty tough when you read this section to believe that the preacher is Solomon, because Solomon was during a days that were so good. Everything was looking up, everything was great, everybody was at peace, and yet chapter 7 through 11 isn't going to show any of that. You're not going to have pictures of good days. And it's all going to be, how do you deal with this? You might remember in both Nehemiah and Malachi, especially Malachi, what are the people complaining about? You see this in chapter 2:17 into 3 in Malachi, where the people are saying, look at all the evil people who are prospering, and we're not getting anything. It doesn't do us any good to serve God because nothing comes up good. And so this is really what the preacher is addressing. People who are concerned about, I don't have wealth, I don't have this, I don't have peace. The wicked are riding on horses and we are nobodies around here. Well, that was exactly the way it was in the Persian Empire, and exactly what you see both in Nehemiah and in Malachi. So anyway, just a heads up on that. We got everybody in here, I think. Let's begin with prayer. Father, thank you for this morning. What a blessing to be able to wake up, to be able to be with you and be with one another and love our enjoyment of you. Help us to see these great words so that we can live our lives more in honor of you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, quickly what we have looked at in 7:1 through 14, character is better than wealth and laughter, how we deal with these days of adversity. We saw this in 1 through 6. In 7 through 10, patience is better than anger and the longing for former days. Yes, things are tough right now, and any of us can say at certain parts in our life, yeah, things are really tough. Don't lose your cool. Don't long for the former days. Things will change. Things are going to work out and come to a better completion. The day of death is better than the day of birth. In between can be a little rough, is the idea. And then verses 11 and 12, wisdom is better than an inheritance. Inheritance is good and a protection, but he says wisdom is going to provide actual lasting knowledge. As he says, it will preserve your life for the one who has it. So if you have wealth, that's not necessarily going to preserve your life. But you will preserve your life if you have wisdom. So he has that. And then he concludes this section with verses 13 and 14 that we have not talked about yet. But this is extremely important. I like to think of these two verses as a critical, pivotal point in the whole book. He is just basically a nice summary of what he's talked about before and what then will follow toward the end in chapter 12. So let's take a look at that. Consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked. In the day of prosperity be joyful, and in the day of adversity consider. God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him. All right, what's your observations on that? You should have some brilliant thoughts from that particular, those two verses.
Kind of like we saw back in chapter 3, in the seasons of life, you have no control.
Okay.
For those, you can't choose when you're going to be joyful. Like the days of prosperity, you can't choose those. And you can't choose adversity. Those things are going to come upon you regardless.
Good.
So what's going to be your attitude?
Good. That's really good. So what's going to be your attitude, since, as he has very well in those first 6 chapters shown us that you can't control these things. And so there's going to be these days of prosperity, and there's going to be these days of adversity. And so you need to understand, as he says at the very end of verse 14, so that, now that's a good one, so that man cannot find out anything that will be after him. So that's an important principle. That's a repetition of chapter 3:22. That's an important principle that needs to be in our minds. I can't figure out what's going to happen after me. And then there's a big therefore. In other words, why is that important for us? All right, so what other observations do you have for 13 and 14?
Who would you depend on when these things happen?
Good.
Where are you going to look to?
Yeah.
Because you can look at the earthly things and think that you will solve them, but you cannot.
If I don't know what's going to happen after me, and if I can't control these things, then where are you going to put your eyes and your trust and your faith and your hope? Well, you put it in God, because he's the only one who controls and orders these things. So you're going to say, well, all right. It reminds me of when Paul is going to Rome, and remember, he's out on that Mediterranean Ocean, and he has this storm comes up. I always think that's very interesting. God brings a 14-day storm. You ever heard of such a crazy thing as a 14-day storm out on the ocean? That you think, well, 3 days. 14 days, 2 solid weeks. It just keeps on going. And they're dumping everything overboard and everything else. And one of the interesting little statements is they just took down the sails and let her go. And that's what you got to do with life. You just take down the sails. You're not going to buck this. You're not going to stop this. You're not going to change this. Take the sails down and say, here we go. I was on a flight from Fayetteville, Arkansas to Dallas one time when there were prop planes back in those days from Fayetteville. You probably remember some of that. And boy, I tell you what, you get in a big storm in that prop plane and it's like unbelievable. We had a bunch of college kids on that particular flight, and it started doing the whoop-de-doos. And I see the flight attendant. I turned around and looked at her, and she's in the back buckled up and white as a sheet. You're thinking, if she's scared, I ought to be scared. I just took my foot and braced it on the side of the plane and went, here we go. The college kids were doing this. Woo! Woo! I started dying laughing. I couldn't believe it. I go, just like a bunch of dumb college kids. That's the way to go. Unbuckling, here we go. You know, well, it's kind of life. That's the way you have to deal with that. All right, what other observations here? This is good. We're not at verse 18. Verse 13 and 14.
I'm sorry. I get ahead. I read ahead and I get.
Consider this. What do you say about in the day of prosperity be joyful? Tell me something about that.
It's okay to enjoy it. You don't have to
Okay.
be guilty about it.
Good.
It's a gift.
Day of adversity, be joyful. It's okay to enjoy what God has given you. It's a good day. Enjoy. All right? What else?
Yeah, it seems almost unnecessary that you have to say that. Watch the world standards. Like, oh, if you're prosperous, obviously you're going to be happy. But I think implicit in that statement is you can be prosperous but not be joyful.
So you have a good day of prosperity, and you're not even recognizing it because you're picking. You're picking about, but this isn't right, but that isn't perfect, but they did. Hey, you had a good time in your life right now. This is a good time. Stop and look back at your blessings. We used to sing a song, Count Your Many Blessings, name them one by one. Look at your blessings. You should be joyful about where you are right now. This is really, really good. We don't do that a lot. We get discontent. Well, I want this. Well, I wish I had that. Well, I stop it. Now you're ruining the day of prosperity. You're ruining it. God has given you something.
The contrast I also see between adversity and prosperity, or at least to me, is in the days of prosperity we wish they would last forever, but we know they're not going to. Opposite of that is true sometimes for us. When we're in adversity, we think it's going to last forever, but it's not going to.
No. Good.
And I think the point is God gives us those opportunities, those circumstances.
Sure.
And neither of them are permanent under the sun.
Yeah. So very, very good. And that's a good way, again, to be able to flow through these waves of life and stuff. And you're going to have calm times, and you're going to have waves and things, and you go through it. So in the day of adversity, consider. So I need to stop and consider. Well, God made one as well as the other, and he had a really important purpose for that. And Franco's already pointed it out. He has a really important purpose to turn my eyes toward him and realize I can't figure out what's going to happen after me, and therefore there's no reason for me to get all upset about today because it happens to be a day of adversity. And that's really hard to follow. We don't like adverse days. We get upset. We lose sleep, all those things. But he's really trying to show us you got to come down off that, and that is a challenge. But it is also a huge challenge to be joyful in the day of prosperity, because we tend to want to complain even in those days, and that's not what he's looking for. Good, Adam.
I think it's also important to remember that he is presenting the idea of that man can't know what's going to come after him. You can, to use like software speak, you can see that as a feature or a bug. Like you can see that as a good thing or a bad thing. Often we think about it as a bad thing. I need to know what's coming next. But really he's saying, like, in the day of prosperity, you should enjoy it because you don't know what's going to happen next. You might have more prosperity, you might have adversity. Yeah. Same thing with adversity. You're going to struggle through it, but you don't know what's next. If you trust the Father and you have a long-term, an eternal viewpoint, you don't need to know what's next. You're okay.
Yeah, okay.
Either way, and you trust that God's going to take care of you. And so you don't spend a lot of time worrying, is this goodness going to last forever? Is this badness going to end soon? It's all going to end soon, because I'm going somewhere else for eternity.
Yeah, good. It's so silly when we step back and look at it. It's so silly to have day of adversity, a day of prosperity, and simply be thinking about, I wonder when the other shoe's going to drop. Would you just enjoy today? Don't worry about what's going to happen tomorrow, because you can't change tomorrow anyway. It's in God's control. So it's very, very good admonition. I love that particular text. That should be something that really summarizes for you one of the main messages I want to learn.
One more observation is that God causes the sun to shine upon the righteous and the unrighteous. So one man's adversity could be another man's prosperity. When it hails and damages roofs, it might be my adversity, but it's roofer's prosperity.
Yes, roofer's prosperity. That's exactly right. Roofers are going, yay, hail. There you go. Yeah, it really is. And he really, all through this, he keeps trying to get us to calm down. It's going to be okay. Because if you're looking above the sun, you're looking toward God, and God's going to make it okay because He's the one in control. All right, very, very good. Let's transition now to this next section, verses 15 through 29. I've just labeled it inequities that wisdom will correct. Inequities that wisdom will correct. And we take this first section, there are two sections here in this, 15 through 22. What happens when the righteous perish and the wicked prolong their lives? So verse 15, in my vain life I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evil doing. So this is again just nearly identical to what's addressed in Malachi. Verse 16, be not overly righteous and do not make yourself too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Be not overly wicked, neither be a fool. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you should take hold of this, and from that withhold not your hand. For the one who fears God shall come out from both of them. Wisdom gives strength to the wise man more than to 10 rulers who are in a city. Surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. Do not take to heart all the things that people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. Your heart knows that many times you yourself have cursed others. All right, so here's this first interesting, you'd say crooked thing in verse 15. The righteous man perishes in his righteousness, and yet this wicked man is able to prolong his life in his evil doing. In other words, he just keeps living this evil life and he prolongs it. And that is so frustrating to the righteous. I looked up this morning, I just asked Siri this morning, I said, how old is Vladimir Putin? I just wanted to know, maybe how much longer does this evil man have, you know? And the guy's 71 years old. Oh, well, okay, so he's getting there. Whatever. But not that I wish any evil on any person. Just wondering.
He's not giving up his power.
No, I don't think he's giving up his power. But he has all this more time to repent, and that's, we're going to look at it positively. That's great. Okay, so you see that, and then there's these crazy words in verse 16 and 17. So, and verse 16, 17, and 18. You got to take that all together. So what would be your conclusion about don't be overly righteous, but don't be overly wicked either? What would it mean to be overly righteous? Adam.
I mean, I think you got to take it all the way down to verse 20.
You do.
Because I think verse 20 is the answer to that.
Yes.
He's saying, there's not even a righteous man who doesn't sin. So I think he's kind of helping us to see, not that we should be unrighteous exactly, but you can be as perfect as you want to be, or you can strive for this perfection concept, but you're still going to sin.
Yeah.
So I think that can sound like he's saying he shouldn't try. I think what he's kind of emphasizing is you can take righteousness to a point where it also ruins your life.
It's true. So
And
what
you're
we
still
got
gonna sin.
what we got to do is describe people in the Bible who were that way, because there are people, Brian.
Self-righteous, maybe?
Yeah, good. The selfish righteousness that you see with the Pharisees, I think, could easily define this. You are overly righteous, not in the sense of I'm trying to be really, really good, but in the sense that I am trying to just manipulate goodness and righteousness to my benefit and to the way I think it would fit my life. And so you have a Pharisaical attitude, but you're obviously not doing what verse 18 says. You're not fearing God. In other words, this is an outward, as Brian says, an outward self-righteous type of lifestyle. Perfect example of it would be Luke 18, verse 9 through 13, where you have the tax collector and the Pharisee in the temple. And remember, the Pharisee prays, and he just tells God about how great he is. I tithe, I do this, and I'm not like that tax collector. He never asks for mercy. He never claims his own sins. He never any of those things, and the tax collector won't even look up to heaven, strikes his heart and says, God be merciful to me, a sinner. And Jesus says he's the one who goes down righteous, because he's the one who actually fears God and isn't promoting himself. So that seems to be the contrast that's given here, Wayne.
My vision of that is like people that want to be like in a monastery, withdraw themselves from the
Yeah,
world.
okay.
Because you're not going to have any influence on
Yeah.
anybody else to get them to heaven if you're overly righteous.
Yeah.
In other words, I don't want to have anything to do with that person.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. You just summarized Colossians 2:20 through 23. If with Christ you died to the elemental spirits of the world, why, as if you are still alive in the world, do you submit to regulations? Do not handle, do not touch, do not taste, do not touch, referring to things that all perish as they are used, according to human precepts and teachings. These have indeed an appearance of wisdom in promoting self-made religion and asceticism and severity to the body, but they're of no use, no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. So there's this overly righteous type thing. He says it won't do a thing to change who you really are and keep you from indulging in fleshly things. In fact, that itself is just fleshly things. So you know, I always remember the guy who went to the doctor's office with headaches, and he just couldn't do anything about it. And the doctor says, well, do you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? And he goes, I don't do any of those things. He says, you have a headache because you're wearing your halo too tight. There you go. So, loosen up, would you? So sometimes that's just exactly, I see people who are just, yes, we want to be careful to obey the Lord, but my goodness, you're adding rules and making your life miserable, and pretty soon you're going to crack. I've seen that with parents with kids, and they just hold on for all they're worth, and as soon as they leave the home, they go bananas because they've never learned to have develop their own character and their own faith and their own trust in God. It's all rule, and rules that you can't even find in the Bible a lot of times. It's just drawing fences around God's rules. So a lot of care here. All right, so there's that picture, and he adds to that in verse 19, then wisdom gives strength. So if fearing God and living with wisdom is going to give strength to you more than this 10 rulers in a city that might have physical outward power. But your wisdom is going to handle that. And then verse 20, as Chip pointed out, is righteous man on earth does good and never sins, and or Adam pointed out. And so do not take to heart all these things that people say. So what's this bringing you down to is how you treat one another. How would you summarize verse 20 and 21 as how we treat one another?
I think he's pointing out that you can't expect perfection from others because you're not perfect yourself.
Good. You're not perfect yourself, so be careful. Don't expect perfection from everyone else, and that is just something, those two verses are violated a lot. We're just livid because we heard somebody say something that they shouldn't have said, and yet we have done the same thing at times. Calm down. We all make dumb statements off the cuff that we shouldn't make, and we need to do better at that. But on the other hand, don't take everything to heart that may be said. Adam.
Well, it also speaks to, again, the concept of not being too righteous. Every time I hear someone else, I condemn them, but I believe I deserve grace and mercy.
Right. Good. That's a good way. That's a good connection. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Very good. All right. Then this last section, I just labeled it what wisdom can and cannot discover, because the preacher says you can just go so far in trying to figure out wisdom, and then that's it. So notice beginning of verse 23. He says, all this I have tested by wisdom. I said, I'll be wise, but it was far from me. That which has been is far off and deep and very deep. Who can find it out? So what is his frustration? What does he finally admit?
That he doesn't know everything.
Yeah, and you can't. He says, you know, you can just search and search and search, and you're still limited by your humanness. And he says, even that which is past is far off. It's difficult. You see that frustration with Job, and as we have studied that, and him wanting to understand all these things, but he can't. And then when we get to God's speech, God says, what do you know? And he asks him all these questions. And Job goes, I don't know. And he goes, great, that's all I wanted you to know. I wanted you to know that you don't know. And so what are you going to do if you don't know? You're going to put trust in me. That's an amazing thing for us to get under our belt. Very true. All right, then he has this little tough section here. He says in verse 25, I turned my heart to know and to search out and to seek wisdom and the scheme of things, and to know the wickedness of folly and the foolishness that is madness. And I find something more bitter than death. The woman whose heart is snares and nets, and whose hands are fetters. He who pleases God escapes her, but the sinner is taken by her. I might just stop and point out here before we take the next few verses that, you know, Proverbs writes from the standpoint of mostly to men when it comes to these ideas of adultery and sexual sins. He writes it from the standpoint of men being careful and avoiding women who would be that way. And I think it's pretty obvious. Of course, he's writing for his son. I think it's pretty obvious that those roles could be reversed very easily, and it could be the man, and we know there are ad nauseum men who do the same thing. So don't get all, as one of my trainees said years ago, don't get your knickers in a knot concerning that he's talking about men to women and not women to men, because it goes both sides. At any rate, he says all of that is just foolishness and wicked. So at the end of verse 26, he who pleases God escapes her, but the sinner is taken by her. Behold, this is what I found, says the preacher, while adding one thing to another, to find the scheme of things which my soul has sought repeatedly, but I have not found. One man among 1,000 I found, but a woman among all these I have not found. See, this alone I found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. So it might be easy to go, wow, preacher found one man among 1,000, but not one woman among 1,000. Well, let's think about that for a second. If you put that in the days of the Persian Empire, if you'll remember our studies in Esther and how women were treated, put that in those days of the Persian Empire. Can you give an explanation if you were talking to somebody who's not a Christian? How could you give an explanation of this, possible explanation of this? Easiest way to think of the book of Esther, how women were treated.
Women had no control of their lives.
Pardon?
Women had no control of their lives.
Yeah.
If they tried to do what was right, they probably weren't alive anymore.
And what was the easiest way to have some kind of meaning and control? By their own physical beauty and using that. And this may be the idea here that, in fact, he's not complimenting men here at all. You might find one in 1,000, but he says, I personally just haven't found a woman in all of these. And what do you see in the book of Esther? You see a constant thing where women have the only power they have is the use of their beauty and their body, and so the tendency is to try to use that to be able to find some significance and importance in their lives, and use themselves that way. And so that he's warning against it, and obviously it could go either way. But when you have a society where you are exalting the physical appearance of women and the sexuality and stuff, then it's a downward spiral for men and women, and he's giving a big warning about it. So if you can think of a better explanation of that, I'd love to hear it. But that's about the best I could discover on it. And
it doesn't line up with the rest of the Bible.
No. If you put it all in context of everything, you would certainly say, as Bernice and I said one time. Bernice says we're converting a lot of women, but not too many men. And if we don't get more men, there won't be enough in heaven to sing bass. So I've always found men much more stubborn about Christianity than I have women. Yes, Debbie.
Not saying that this is what it means, but I know that my Bible says it means you can't figure out a man.
Okay, you can't figure out a woman.
That's if you're a man.
Yeah. Well, now there you go. I hadn't thought of that angle. At any rate, I don't think the preacher here is complimenting either men or women in this. He's just giving a huge warning about the things that can happen. All right, let's go to chapter 8 here, and he begins. There's 3 sections in chapter 8. We'll begin with verses 1 through 9. Who is like the wise, and who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face shine, and the hardness of his face is changed. I say, keep the king's command because of God's oath to him. And NIV and some of the others translate differently, the because of your oath to God. And I think that's more accurate here. Verse 3, be not hasty to go from his presence. Do not take your stand in an evil cause, for he does whatever he pleases. For the word of the king is supreme. And who may say to him, what are you doing? Whoever keeps the command will know no evil thing, and the wise heart will know the proper time and the just way. For there is a time and a way, or ASV, time and judgment, for everything, although man's trouble lies heavy on him. For he does not know what is to be, for who can tell him how it will be? No man has power to retain the spirit, or power over the day, over the day of death. There is no discharge from that war, nor will wickedness deliver those who are given to it. All this I observed while applying my heart to all that is done under the sun, when man had power over man to his hurt. All right, so again, dealing with his audience in a situation where you are being oppressed. He's dealt with that kind of thing many times. Now he gives the wisdom in it. So how would you describe the wisdom that is given here when government is abusive and oppressive? And of course, obviously, you could apply that to any situation in your job. Maybe you have abusive manager or owner or whatever it is. So there's various ways that could be applied as well. So what's his emphasis?
I think there's an aspect of the same message that he's been saying over and over again about a lack of control. And in this instance, he's talking about the king. He's saying, hey, you can't control what the king does with you. If you enter his presence and he decides that you're done, you're done. And accept it. And or vice versa, if he sends you to war, what are you going to do about it? So there's an aspect of, hey, just be content with whatever the king decides to do with you.
Good. And like if you think of the days of Esther, anybody want to just walk in front of the king and have an argument with him? we got gallows out here anytime you'd like to be hung on them. So yeah, there is this idea of acquiescing in order to save yourself, basically. All right, what else? What other observation you have?
There's a right time and a right way
Good.
to discuss or to bring up the oppression.
Yeah, he points that out a couple of times here, that there is a time and judgment, and maybe that time and judgment is what God does eventually, and how God may take care of this. And that time and judgment may be, you waiting in wisdom to see the appropriate time to maybe challenge what's going on and maybe try to change what's going on. But in the meantime, you need to understand you've made an oath before God, and this is the same argument that Paul uses in Romans 13, that you are going to submit to the government because, first and foremost, of your standing before God. And because these governing authorities, as abusive as they may be, have been appointed by God. And if they wouldn't be in that situation if it weren't for God allowing that to take place. So you have to have that kind of understanding there as well. Okay? So good. Adam.
I think that brings within the concept of grace for us. When we're in these situations, God isn't expecting us to right every wrong in every situation all the time. He expects us to do that sometimes when the time is right and the impact can be impactful, but he's not expecting us to be a warrior type person who's righting every single wrong in every occasion. He blesses us with some grace in that.
Yeah. Good. How does verse 8 figure into this? 7 and 8 especially. Yeah.
Even the king who is creating this calamity can't protect himself from his eventual demise.
That's right. Even he is not going to be able to battle the day of death. This is exactly when I looked up how old Vladimir Putin was. Just like, okay, he's not going to fight against the day of, he's not going to retain the spirit, he's not going to keep himself from dying. So you're looking at a king who's abusing you and abusing everybody else and all of this. Take a deep breath. He's not going to last. As a matter of fact, at the end of verse 8, nor will wickedness deliver those who are given to it. If you're given to wickedness, it's not going to deliver you. You just think it's going to. It was just very interesting to me to watch dictatorships and communist governments. If anybody rises up and tries to say we should have freedom, they're going to squash it as fast as they can, even if they have to murder people or put them in prison or take them away and you never see them again. They're shooting themselves in the foot and they don't even know it. Your wickedness is not going to solve this, and the more you do that, the more likely your people are going to rise up against you when the moment is right. But they don't get that because they don't like it that anybody would have any authority above them, including God. And that's Nebuchadnezzar, and that's rulers today and things like that. So God is just through this preacher just saying, you got to understand, he's weak. He doesn't have the power. He's not going to be able to continue this forever. When you've lived as long as many of us have, you can look back and see many, many wicked rulers in the world who are long gone, and they did not survive in their wickedness. So as verse 7 says, he doesn't know when this time is going to be. Who can tell him how it will be? You don't know anything that's going to happen after. This whole thing could change tomorrow. And just in a short time, in the last 10 years, lots of things have gone changed in different directions. You don't know. So take a deep breath, relax. And that's hard, again, to do when you're frustrated by the oppression, as he began the whole statement. All right? So then the next section here, verse 10, all the way down to chapter 9:6 is really, I think, one whole section, but we'll take it one at a time. Look at 10 through 13 first. Then I saw the wicked buried. They used to go in and out of the holy place and were praised in the city where they had done such things. This also is vanity. Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. Though a sinner does evil 100 times and prolongs his life, yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God, because they fear before him. But it will not be well with the wicked, neither will he prolong his days like a shadow, because he does not fear before God. All right, in verse 10 and 11, verse 10 especially, first off, describe this wicked man. Describe what's going on, this wicked man, and what's going on with him.
The wicked man looks holy,
Okay?
but he's not.
Yeah, so he goes in and out of the holy place. You know, he's one who tries to put on the appearance that he's righteous. You know, this disgusting, hypocritical type of life. And so this is where he is, and then he dies, and he's buried. Okay, so what else do we see happening after he dies? Yeah. Yeah. You ever been to a funeral like that? I have. In a funeral where of a guy that I did everything I could to try to get him to quit drinking and quit living in the life he lived. And he killed himself basically drinking too much alcohol. And the preacher of a denomination stood up and preached him right into heaven and talked about how wonderful he was. And I'm like, you know, we need to warn the next generation of this kind of lifestyle, and that's just not appropriate. But this is what everybody goes, oh, he was so wonderful. No, he wasn't. Everybody knew he wasn't, but that's it. So then the conclusion is verse 11. How do you describe that?
I've had people say to me, you know, they're going to get what they deserve.
Yeah.
I keep telling them, it may not be in this life.
It may not be in this life. That's exactly
right. It may not
right.
happen when you think, and that's why people keep doing evil, because they get away with it.
That's right. Okay, they get away with it. You know, our first, especially I think most of us as Christians, our first thought is, goodness, if our government would just simply not wait 25 years to punish somebody with endless, especially somebody who's an open murderer, and you go through appeal after appeal after appeal after appeal, and you go, once they're convicted and you've got 2 to 3 witnesses, etc., and there's no question, no doubt. If there's doubt, please don't do it. But if there's no question and doubt, put them to death. That's what God said to do. Let's not wait 22 years. That would be a great deterrent. But I want to point something out. While that's a true principle, I think from this text, that's not what he's talking about. Who's delaying judgment in this text? God is. That's right. God's the one delaying judgment, and that drives us cuckoo. And it causes wicked people to give themselves to wickedness, because they do it and they go, I got away with it and nothing happened. I didn't get struck dead.
It reminds me of somebody like a king Omri, or someone like
Yeah.
that, where they're extremely prosperous, very wicked king. God would get any moment to smoke them down.
That's right. Yeah.
But he didn't.
Exactly. How long did Manasseh reign? The most wicked king in the southern kingdom, shed innocent blood like crazy. He reigned 55 years. 55 years. And if you were a righteous person, you just went somewhere to a cave and hoped he didn't find you. That was a horrid period of time.
It reminds me of a Ponzi scheme. they start once,
Yeah.
they get away with it, and they
Yeah,
do
do it more.
and
Yeah.
more, and then they got millions of dollars.
Yeah, and then something happens that crumbles down on them too. But there you have that principle. So verse 12 and 13 then is the comfort that he tries to give us by saying, look, even a sinner who may, as the Ponzi scheme thing, he may get away with it 100 times and may prolong his life. Doesn't matter. It's going to be well with those who fear God. It's not going to be well with those who sinners and decide that they can, even if they do prolong their life like a shadow gets prolonged as the sun goes, even if they prolong their life, they are going to not be well. It won't be well with them. So there is his conclusion in that. All right? So very good. I think we made good progress here this morning. Would you pay attention? Please take the time next week to really look at chapter 9, from chapter 8:14 through chapter 9. It's all one section. Please ignore the chapter division and go through that. This is an extremely important section that we want to take some time with. So see if you can figure out what's happening here. There's some challenges in the text. Thank you very much.